Welcome, everybody. Nice to be with you all today. We're excited to be sitting down with Ed Davies from InterAll Group, also InterNature. I think we'll definitely touch on that today during the conversation. But InterAll is one of the newest solutions to the Smart Building Collective, focusing on connectivity, infrastructure, making sure that buildings are smart ready and ready and capable to deliver value for their owners, for their occupiers, for their users. So we're really excited to dive into it today to talk about their solution certification, talk about how the solution and how the company is adding value to real estate, because in the end, that's what it's all about. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Ed Davies. And Ed, let's just start with the question of who you are, where are you, and how did we come to InterAll as a company?
Sure, yeah. So, Edward Davies, co-founder of InterAll. We are currently sat in sunny, rainy Manchester. And yeah, I've a bit of back history. I've worked in telecoms or internet since I was 16. I originally started off being in mobile phone shops at the Link and T-Mobile and things like that. And then when I moved up to Manchester from just north of London, I joined an internet service provider who specialised in lease lines and dedicated internet connectivity. Right when that technology was pretty new. It was about 13 years ago now that I joined there. Anyway, what I established there was that obviously delivery times were atrocious, and the majority of the cost for a dedicated lease line came from actually bringing the fibre into the building. So we end up working with a number of different buildings within London, actually predominantly, and some business parks where we ran the fibre in, terminated that in the building, got away leave up front, connected all the tenants, and were able to provide them with internet connectivity when they moved in, within kind of 5-6 days rather than the 90 working days that the industry came to is still struggling to get over at the moment. So that was what, 10 years ago now. And when I've worked for a number of different ISPs since, and we've always done kind of connected building solutions, and there's some great solutions out there. The thing is that I realized is that the evolution of technology in buildings is rapidly evolving. Building management systems and other in-building systems used to be sitting on a head end, a monitor and a computer in in basically a basement. It used to be all managed by one guy sitting there. That's quickly becoming, where the data is now being stored predominantly in the cloud. The systems are now becoming smarter, more intelligent, doing analytics, capturing more data. And that presents a huge opportunity for building managers, but also presented a lot of risks. And these risks were, along with the fact that if obviously the connectivity they are running on is just not is not good enough, then what's going to end up happening is obviously if those systems go down, parts of the building may not work. The other part was the cybersecurity piece that was quite obvious, that the more systems you have connected to the internet in your building, the larger surface area you have for attacks. And I couldn't see there were other solutions out there that were really focusing on those two key areas. And there was also my dad and my brother have run an EV charging company and a green energy company for 20 years, and been specialists in that area for 10. So the environmental side has always been really important to me as well. And again, a lot of these solutions, I could see that the solutions would be able to facilitate someone being able to decrease the amount of carbon they would emit, but they didn't seem to be focusing on reducing their own. So all of this combined meant that after some good conversations with some investors, we secured a reasonable upfront investment and launched InterAll. And our purpose and the reason we exist is to make buildings a better experience for those who use them through technology. And the fundamental part of that is interConnect, which is our internet connectivity and cybersecurity smart ready infrastructure that we install in a building, do away leave up front. We then work with the staff on site to make sure they have the connectivity they need. We also work with the building system providers to make sure that they have the internet they need, and then we also make sure we terminate the fibre into each of the demises within the building. So when a tenant moves in, they're not waiting 5-6 months. They're looking at 5-6 days to get connected. And this meant that the buildings were smart ready. So we then looked at obviously providing just those internet connections and realised actually there's probably more that we can do than just provide an internet connection, because all of these system providers are bringing in their own switches and bringing in their own network gear, and a lot of the time they're not They're not actually managed kit. It's just deployed as a kind of dumb switch. So we said, well, why don't we do the whole switching equipment? And what that meant is that we created InterOne, and InterOne basically means we converge all of these networks that are currently in buildings onto one unified solution. And again, what we end up finding with when now we do that is that a lot of landlords would much prefer to have one network provider in the building doing everything and not have multiple incoming connections and multiple networks that they have to manage. And we do proactive monitoring and proactive management of those. So we look out for spikes in traffic, we look out for complete dropouts of traffic or severe reductions in traffic, and we notify both the system provider and the landlord 24 hours a day automatically. And again, it gives them peace of mind that even if they're not in the building, they believe that their building should be running 24/7. They should be, and we support with that. And then finally, to bring it all together, we partnered with DigiSpace, who we met through the Smart Building Collective. And DigiSpace is a platform that is a single portal that gives visibility of any data that is available through an API or through any other means. And obviously, we first looked at giving visibility of our solutions because internet's kind of an invisible but necessary solution. So we wanted to give full visibility to landlords of interesting bits like dwell time and uptime and usage and utilization and using the Wi-Fi to do some quite clever stuff. But then we also looked at, well, why don't we unify all of the building systems data onto this one platform, which is what DigiSpace is designed to do. So it means we can provide one platform with live insights and analytics as well. So as well as being able to look after the tenants for Wi-Fi, internet, comms room fit out, cabling, we can then give full visibility, and we bring it all together with a human-led approach. Because without people, technology is pointless, and there's no point in putting technology in for technology's sake.
I love that. And so much to unpack. You just hit on so many different topic areas, and I think DigiSpace is a perfect segue. It's a perfect example of kind of the power of what you guys are doing. Is if you get your infrastructure right from a connectivity perspective, you can start to put all kinds of systems on it and pull value from it. And I think that DigiSpace is probably the first of many. The Smart Building Collective has a lot of solutions that are able to integrate with what you guys are doing. So I'm excited to see where you guys take that conversation and see where it goes. And one of the things we've been talking about a lot is that functionality set that you're talking about when it comes to DigiSpace or others that you work with. That's really where value is created. That's where businesses can start to use the data in a meaningful way to drive value in their organization. The risk, on the other hand, is created in the infrastructure side, which is where you very much are busy building, in your connectivity, in your APIs, and how you connect systems and how you get systems to work to each other. That's really where risk is created. So I'd like to kind of dive into both of those areas. But what's so interesting about smart buildings and the stakeholder map that we deal with is that the powers that be, the ones who make the decisions, or the ones who are looking for the value in their businesses, aren't necessarily the ones who understand this stuff to the degree that you do and the other partners that you work with. So before we dive into kind of the nuts and bolts and how InterAll plays against the whole SBC framework, I'd like to tap your mind a little bit on what is the difference between connectivity 12 years ago to connectivity now, and what are the things that people should be thinking about when making decisions for the right connectivity provider or connectivity in general? What are the pros and the cons, and what should they be weighing?
It's a really interesting one, actually, because 12 years ago, a 100 meg lease line was close to £1,000 a month. You're now looking at it being £150 a month, £200 a month, depending on who you're speaking to. But so it was cost prohibitive to a lot of smaller businesses, whereas now, £50 a week, most restaurants can justify that to give good connectivity to those who decide to set up and work from their restaurant or cafe for the day. But the thing is back then, a lot of connectivity run on copper, and copper, it degrades. It also isn't stable. It also can't run over as long distances, and basically it's not sustainable in terms of ecological solution as well. So the move to fibre, dedicated fibre, was a big move. And you can now run multiple internet connections across one fibre by using different, basically separating out the light that runs down it into different colours. And each color would be a different internet connection. It's all very, very clever and very, very interesting. But the thing is what the internet connectivity being available to most, if not all, businesses now, in terms of in terms of being widely available, as in installed and spread and actually outside or inside most buildings, but also commercially, realistically available and achievable by those companies, is that companies have moved from housing their data on site to housing it in the cloud and off site, and moving the large overhead and capital cost and maintenance cost and energy cost to having their own servers and having their own data housed in their buildings, to actually being able to host that in the cloud for a fraction of the cost and have that housed in a reliable and a good environment. And that's one of the biggest changes that connectivity has provided to both the built environment and also to businesses generally. But interestingly enough, when it comes to bandwidth and internet connectivity and the availability of good quality internet, it's shown across loads of different communities and loads of different businesses that it fundamentally enhances the quality of the output and also the financial state of those locations that have better connectivity as well.
Amazing. So, and what do you think about that discussion about in the cloud versus on premise? Is there still a weighing there that companies should be doing of which one to be doing? And then the use of internet, in connectivity 12 years ago till now, I know that we are using it for a lot more things, right? So our need for it has risen. Can you say a little bit about the on-premise versus in the cloud kind of discussion?
So in essence, hosting servers on site was a necessity, because obviously getting the bandwidth and getting the reliability of internet to then host it in a data center was difficult unless you had a lot of money to throw at it. But it was always a better option to host it in let's say in a data center. So it moved from hosting your own servers on site to hosting your own servers in a data center, and then moved to being in virtualized environments, which is the cloud environments we know now. The benefits of having it on site is obviously that it's in terms of being able to access it and the latency and the immediacy of that data being available is far better, because the distance that you're traveling to get that data is far lower. However, do you have redundant power in place? Do you have the right level of security in place? Do you have the right level of expertise in house to be able to manage and install and obviously maintain that kit as well? And there's a lot of cost to that as well. So moving that into a data center gave you redundant power. It meant that you could get a location that was completely secured, completely clean, no dust, things like this. So there was benefits to having it offsite. But again, that was quite an expensive venture. So smaller companies couldn't have done that. Moving that into the cloud is obviously it's much lower cost. It's much more accessible, and it's much and obviously, but obviously you do have to understand that you are then at the mercy of the internet and also of their capacity as well. Now, most cloud providers these days have huge amounts of capacity going into them, and accessing that data is relatively simple. However, obviously you are then running over the internet, so you've got to make sure that the connectivity is right and the security is right on that end as well.
Yeah. And what about this shift that we see towards kind of converged networks versus what was there 10, 12 years ago? What was there, and what should we be thinking about moving forward?
Do you mean in terms of in a building?
In a building, yeah.
Yeah. So typically, when I first started out in this industry, it was you bring an internet connection in and you get a way leave from the landlord for that individual internet connection. And
what is a way leave for those that don't know what it is?
Sure. So a way leave is a legal agreement between the landlord and the service provider. It basically protects the landlord to make sure that the building is obviously left in the condition that it was found in before the providers went in, and obviously that the contractors work up to the standards that they expect. But also then means that the service provider can get access to that building and get access to their equipment to then make any repairs or to fault fix or fault find if needed. So it's an essential part that is definitely needed still to this day. The thing is obviously bringing an internet connection in would take, let's say 75 to 90 working days, plus then a way leave would be a legal agreement. So solicitors still, didn't always move the quickest. And obviously they could be costly as well. They could be about £2,000. So you'd have multiple fibre runs into a building from probably either a DP in the building or a node just outside, basically a distribution point. And each of those fibres would then be allocated to each individual business. So you'd have a way leave, a fibre run, engineering work for each business. and then for each provider as well, with the service system provider, if they wanted to be connected to the internet as well. So you can imagine how messy the risers got, how difficult it was to properly manage, and and how much excess there was, how much unnecessary excess there was as well. So obviously bringing now a lot of property managers and landlords are a lot more educated in connectivity, and it's the second most important thing to tenants within a building, as in the staff of tenants within a building, as per Lehman's report. So therefore, it means that a lot of landlords are making provisions up front to make sure they're bringing in service providers or some kind of solution, but there still are pitfalls there. There still is the typical, let's go through a certification. We'll put in two different fibre providers. We'll bring them into the building. We'll do a way leave, and that'll be fine. But if that's terminated just in the comms room or in the basement, running that fibre up the risers still requires a survey, still requires process, and they still haven't overcome the 45 to 50 working days to do that. But the other thing is obviously that also means that you're looking at it from a very small point of view, whereas obviously there's providers out there like ourselves where we will do far more than just bring a fibre in and terminate it down in a comms room. So the conversion network piece.
How do you solve those challenges that you just mentioned? The long lead times, the multiple confusing cabling and contracting. How do you guys approach it?
Yeah, so we bring in either one or two internet service providers into the building at the point of where where the landlord then signs up with us. We then will run internal fibre to each of the demises, which which typically, historically, the way that big corporates worked is they would only work with one internet service provider because of the way that they had to connect all their sites together. But that's now passed from being about 15% of all businesses to being less than 1%. So by us bringing in these fibre providers and then being able to provide the internet ourselves, it means that we do a way leave up front, bring the fibre in, terminate it into each of the demises, build the comms room out in a tidy and secure and logical way. And then it means if a big corporate does come in and say they absolutely have to work with, let's say, Zayo, who's a lesser known but very well thought of internet service provider, we could still bring them in, terminate them into our equipment, and then provide the service through them. It removes all of these internal cabling. It removes all these way leaves. It removes a lot of the headache and a lot of the installation time that needs to be there.
And then it starts to empower the building to put on all kinds of different functionality and functionality sets for achieving that value that they are after. So the solution certification from the SBC framework, from Smart Building Collective, for those that don't know how the framework is set up, it's comprised of multiple modules, right? The first one being building usage. How do you have control over how your asset is being used? The second module is building performance, talking about kind of the environmental aspects of ESG, your energy optimization, your water optimization, these types of things, your waste. Indoor environment is the third one, which is how do you create a healthy environment? Thinking about air quality and sound and light, these types of things, making sure that it's fit for purpose for humans. Then we have a module on safety and security, which is both physical and digital, and we're going to talk a lot about that in a moment with Ed. And then the last kind of functional module is user behavior in collaboration. And all of these modules are brought together with integrative design. How can we, with the least amount of technology, maximize the value in all of these areas? And also connectivity and infrastructure. And we've already touched quite a bit on connectivity and infrastructure, but we're going to talk more about how it impacts these different areas. So with where you all are now, let's talk about building usage. What is your all's vision for building usage, and how can people capitalize on using a system like yours, using connectivity like yours to maximize how the asset is being used? And one example that we spoke about yesterday, which I thought was really fantastic, was the heat mapping of connectivity in itself, right? Of where are the optimal spaces to use versus places that might not be as easy to work in, but maybe better for reading a book, as an example. So can you tell us a little bit about your all's vision for building usage and how to help the different stakeholders use the space accordingly?
Of course, yeah. So in terms of building utilization, the first is obviously when a tenant's looking to move into the building. When a tenant's looking to move into the building, obviously they need to make sure that they're connected from day one. Obviously that's exactly what our solution ensures. The other things that we can do is through our Wi-Fi, we can actually, it depends what a landlord wants to see, but we can monitor things like the typical path that people follow through public realm locations. We can monitor dwell times and places that people tend to wait around in. and we can give them visibility of where where the connectivity and Wi-Fi is producing the best performance. Um, this this is really interesting for especially co-working spaces. But another area that we've seen a lot of interest in from is public is kind of outdoor public realms. So because obviously then that way they can monitor the obviously by knowing what path people are taking and where people are dwelling, you can, security wise, if there's a big gathering within this particular area, it can notify security. If there's a path that's most trodden through their estate, they can set up marketing there, or they can charge a premium for space, and there's some really interesting things with that. Um, but you can even do a kind of find my device solution as well, where if obviously if the device user signs up to it, they can either allow themselves to be found by others, or they can go find their device themselves, which is typically the way it's normally used. As well, and that's within a building. So if someone misplaced their phone or laptop or any device that doesn't have to be connected to the Wi-Fi, just has to have a Wi-Fi signal, our solution can then detect where they are.
It's brilliant. So often we think that occupancy data and utilization data needs to come from those types of sensors, but it is interesting to hear that from connectivity itself, you can start to create those kinds of insights and that visibility. When they decide to go a little bit deeper and want to have those types of sensors put in, how difficult is that to do in relation to kind of your program? And what are the things that people should be thinking about when thinking about connectivity, but also not just from a Wi-Fi perspective or getting users connectivity, but getting the building systems the connectivity it needs?
Yeah, so obviously, as soon as you connect a system to the internet, the first thing you've got to think about is how secure the data is, either the platform it's being captured on, or obviously the security that you have within there, the cybersecurity solution that you have in there. That's one of the first considerations. But when obviously the reason we do what we do is because when we go into a building, the reason we engage with each system provider and then qualify what they need in terms of firewalling, how do they, is there any specific configuration they need to make it work for them, but making sure they still remain secure. But also we understand that they will have their solution. They install all the sensors across the building, and they want to bring that back and make sure that obviously that's accessible by the cloud platform that sits at the back end. We just make that seamless. It's really important. What's really important for landlords to make sure they're thinking of is a lot of the time when there is the implementation of technology in general, but especially within the smart realm, what the conversation happens is they discuss what is it that we want to achieve, what technology can provide that. Great, let's go get that technology and install it, and we'll just connect it to whatever's there, and that's great. The thing is obviously if you haven't checked that the connectivity is capable of handling that traffic, and also the other thing is that if you put it on like a public Wi-Fi network, and those devices end up connecting back to building management systems or other internal systems, you're potentially opening up a threat. You're opening up a risk basically in the building, that if someone was to gain access to that device, that sensor, they could actually get back onto the key operational systems within the building and cause havoc. It's not common. It doesn't always happen, but it has. And even casinos in America have fallen foul to it. So it's just worth making sure that when you have the conversation about what technology you're going to put in, the next conversation is, okay, do we have the level of connectivity we need? Great, okay. What software and hardware do we need to put in? Okay, great. And then what security needs to be in place to make sure that the building isn't left vulnerable? And
100%.
then
And
at
I
the
think,
end, review it, look at it, and then make sure that you learn and you change and adapt and go again.
yeah, and I think you hit on some really, really important pieces there. And I think that when it comes to the infrastructure being in place and adding aspects to it in a meaningful way, making sure that that is secure. And these buildings, they may have not been hit in the past, but I think that that's actually going to be very much a growing trend as buildings become smarter and smarter. And the other piece that I think you hit on, which I think is important for people to take note of, is that right now, smart buildings should be put in place to solve the problems that the organization has and the challenges that they're facing. But we do need to build them in a flexible way to continue to add functionality to solve the challenges that are coming. So I think that's an important piece to be thinking about when building your connectivity program. So let's move to building performance real quick. So on one side, It's about the building performance as far as energy and water and these types of things. But I think it's also really a nice moment to mention your InterNature program, right? So what is your all's goal with carbon neutrality, and how do you all impact that ESG element of the sustainability pieces for creating better performing buildings?
Yeah, it's actually an interesting one. So when we founded InterAll, one of our key non-negotiables was that we wanted to make sure every solution we provide is climate positive. So not just carbon neutral, but actually we offset more carbon than we emit. And my experience was painful. As a business that was developing all these other products and making sure that we had all these other systems in place and we had all the right things in place to service our customers, something that was a passion of ours, ended up taking well over half of my time up in terms of development of the business. And the reason for that was because we couldn't find one provider who would just do the end-to-end solution. So we wanted someone who would be able to put in place the electricity meter for our solutions, be able to give us be able to help us capture the raw data that we needed to, and then give us a calculator that we could obviously calculate how much carbon we were emitting through delivering our solutions, and obviously our solutions being live, and then obviously give us the ability to offset it. We actually ended up having to go to one company for the meters, and then another. We then really struggled to find any consistency between a lot of the calculators for carbon offsetting. So we found we actually picked a couple of them and then just put it through, and whichever was the highest figure, that's what we went with. And then the offsetting was just somewhere else. You just had to go to another business and go somewhere else to go do that. And it was a lot of the providers that we were coming across either wanted huge orders of trees being planted, or it was just a bit of, we'll just tell you how many trees we planted, but there wasn't really much of the science off the back of it. So we end up going to an offset in another country in the end, which was ridiculous because it's so far away from where we're actually emitting the carbon. It's it didn't make sense to us. So anyway, I ended up going down to so one of the charities and communities I'm a part of is Mandan Meetup, which is a men's mental health charity and community, and we went down to a local farm I went down with my daughter and a load of the lads from there, and we went planted hedgerows. And as I was knelt down and planting these, I said to Janine who ran the farm, I said, I'm paying someone like in a completely different country to do exactly this. I said, couldn't we just do this together? And she said, well, look, send me a proposal, and we'll have a look at it. So I kind of dipped my foot into it and ended up down a rabbit hole. So 3 weeks of research in my own time in the evenings and the weekends, and I kind of learned everything I possibly could, and found that her land was peatland, which is, if you plant a moss called sphagnum moss, it captures more carbon across the peatland than all the forests combined in the UK. And I thought, well, there's an amazing opportunity, and I could go down and I could actually do this myself, and we could work together. And that turned into me doing it myself, to me and my team and my business doing it ourselves once a quarter, to then realizing that we were offsetting far more carbon than we needed to, which was great, but then also meant that we were creating carbon credits, and then we were increasing the biodiversity of the area, so we could also do biodiversity net gain credits. And Janine had been creating this kind of nature reserve for the last 5 years on the farm that she owned, but had never really had the way to kind of take those aspects that she was creating, those such like credit crops, in another way to put it, out to market. And together we realised that actually, with the smart technology we have and we can deliver, in the sensors that we have access to through the Smart Building Collective, and then our internet connectivity and everything else, we can actually install everything into a building to monitor exactly what the energy and water and what physical waste is, and then we could do the conversion ourselves, and then we can actually bring our clients come down to the farm and actually put their hands in the soil and actually get a feel for it. So that's how InterNature was born, which has been amazing. It's been an amazing ride, but whenever you kind of say to people, I have two businesses, one that is kind of ecological and one that is technical, a lot of people say, well, they don't connect, but hopefully that kind of explains it.
Is it possible for other solutions, buildings, to get involved? Are they able to help offset their emissions through this program, or is it still very much limited?
Yeah, that's exactly what we're set up for. So we've set ourselves up to be able to support the property sector that I already work in being able to offset their carbon in a real way that's not greenwashing, and be able to, whenever you build a property in the UK at the moment, no matter the size, you have to ensure that you are increasing the biodiversity. which you can't obviously if you build on land. So you've got to go you've got to go and increase the biodiversity in another location within the UK. So we can also help them with that as well. Through internature.co.uk, or reach out to me directly, and it'd be great. Anyone who wants to come down and see the farm and see what Janine's doing, and get a feel for it, they'd be more than welcome.
Very cool. Very cool. I love that. And now we're going to shift back. I think that the building performance, the solution performance, making sure that we're putting things as neutrally or even positive into the world as possible is a beautiful vision. And I commend you guys for making that happen. And I'm excited to bring the collective to that program and figure out how we can really work together to do that. Building environment, that's really a functionality set or a reaction set in design to make spaces healthy and vibrant and productive for people. And of course, good connectivity is important, and having a baseline infrastructure to put in all that technology is important. But I don't think we need to touch more on how InterAll delivers in that area, unless you have something to add that's unique. But I want to dive into the security aspect. How, from the cybersecurity perspective, when we're thinking about how to make these things secure, I think that over time, over the coming years, it's going to be a heightened area of interest for all of us as we digitize buildings more and more. How do you recommend, or how do you support your clients to architect that in a way that makes the most sense? And what are the kind of pieces of advice you would give somebody who's setting out on this journey to optimize the connectivity in their space?
Yeah, so the first thing is due diligence of suppliers and of system providers, because I think it was a stat I saw earlier was 75% of building systems tested had a known exploited vulnerability. So it's about making sure that when you do take a system, is it secure as standard? Does it have a good level of security already built into it? If it does, do you have a management contract on that to make sure the software is being updated and everything else as well? And make sure that obviously it's coming from a reputable provider who understands what they're doing and has in place a program to ensure that they are maintaining the security of their own solution. In terms of then the next part is then looking at obviously what you're running that solution on, because you've got to make sure that obviously whatever network that solution runs on, you are then it's secured, it's reliable, and there is in place a solution that's built not for businesses and then installed into a building, but actually built specifically for the built environment, because it's such a different security landscape within a building than it is within a normal enterprise company. And that's where a lot of the property providers kind of fell down, where they were getting quoted thousands of pounds for excessive solutions that were built for not them. So it's the rule I like to kind of always promote is the 80-20 rule, because the 80-20 rule always, if you do 20% of the security measures and you do 80% of that security work, it'll prevent 80% of the attacks. And the majority of the attacks that builders are falling foul to are AI driven or scattergun approaches, where they just throw out the attack to as many different IPs as they can, and just see if they get any luck with it. So you could go beyond that if you have an SST2, if you're looking for big government contracts, or if there is a tenant that you're looking to attract and they specify that you must have this level. But normally, if a tenant has that level, they'll put the security in place themselves. So it's just making sure that you are looking at the network provider, you're looking at the security, and you have someone trusted who you can just ask their opinion and just say, look, do we have the right stuff in place? If anyone wanted to reach out to me and have a chat, I'm more than happy to jump on a call with anyone just to have a look at what they have. And that's kind of the two primary elements. But the third is then education. Education of people is so important when it comes to cybersecurity. It doesn't need to be a 2-day course. It doesn't need to be anything laborious. So the number one way that companies do end up having data leaks or having intrusions is through people, which is why phishing is still so popular. So it's just about making sure you're educating your staff in what they should do, what they shouldn't do, and making sure they have the right kind of level of password and other stuff in place as well. That's the third.
Really nice. I think that's really useful for people to think about, kind of a 3-layered approach to this. It's the solutions that are connected to the connectivity, it's the connectivity itself, and then of course there's the humans that are involved to make sure that doesn't open up ports of leak. But there's also mitigation, I think, that goes into in between those moments as well. So the last module that we talk about is user behavior and collaboration. It goes without saying that without good connectivity, business doesn't turn anymore, and we can't communicate effectively anymore with each other without it. It is the chokehold now on businesses being able to perform. I don't know if you have anything to add to user behavior and collaboration or indoor environment. If you have something that, yeah, an arrow of wisdom in those areas from an InterAll perspective.
We work with 15, 16 different internet service providers, and about 4 or 5 different technologies to provide internet over as well. And the reason why we collaborate and partner with so many is because each building is so unique that actually there is a different internet service provider who's ideal for each building. Because it's not just based upon cost, as a lot of this is looked at for internet. It's also based upon the reliability, how their network is built in the area, and also how easy they are to work with, and how close the network is, and loads of other things that we review up front. So the thing I would say is that in terms of collaboration within the internet service provider industry and particularly, it's vitally important that it continues to evolve, because there's a lot of where there were these alternative networks built within the UK, and each one of them would have a race to deliver as much fibre as they could all across the UK. But actually, when we took a step back and we looked at all the internet service providers that are out there, because we did consider building our own network, and we actually went, well, bringing fibre into the building, it's important that we just work with the best provider for that building, and they may already be in there as well. So I would actually, the one thing I would say on collaboration, it's more within the ISP industry than within the smart industry, is just to potentially look at how we can collaborate better as an industry, because at the moment it is a bit of a turf war in some ways, and I would really like to see other internet service providers and even connected building providers work together, where we can actually leverage each other's assets and deliver the right solution to tenants and even buildings as well. So I think it's that's one thing I'm really open to, and I'm really passionate about as well.
Well, and that's why we are kindred spirits, right? I think the Smart Building Collective is completely built on this idea of collaboration, community, learning from each other, sharing best practices, but also integrating and finding win-win solutions that work together. So this has been amazing. It's so nice to get your thoughts, to pick your brain on these very complex topics, because connectivity is not an easy space to work. So the people who've been doing it for a long time bring incredible value to the collective in our ability to kind of drill down and understand these challenging areas. So before we go, some words of wisdom, and where are we going from here? What does the future look like, and how can the collective best help you? How can they find you? Of course, we can introduce you to them, and we are happy to make those connections. If you would like to meet Ed, just get in touch and we will connect you. But what is your hope for the future, and how can we all help?
The futurists and technologists are really struggling to predict the next parts of the where technology is going to go next, and what's going to be able to be possible. But I think it's the only thing which I kind of stand in is just embrace change, embrace the new technologies, embrace the new future. It's really interesting, because about 18 months ago I ran a roundtable with JMW on smart buildings, and the room was split 50-50. Half the people thought that smart technology was a fad and was a bit I guess woo woo, and the other half, the room really saw the potential value in it, but thought it was really expensive. Fast forward to now, you can implement the right level of technology within a building with the right process and governance up front, and making sure that your ideation process is perfect, for nowhere near as much as people think. But also the value that can be brought to a building with technology is only as far as it then enhances the people's experience and the efficiency of the building itself. So the only thing which everything we build is with kind of open to the future. And the building, the property sector is the second slowest adopter of new technologies. The only thing that's slower is museums and libraries. So yeah, it's so I see the future definitely being around smart technologies, definitely being around people, and and helping people have better experiences and enjoy being in the built environment more. So yeah, so I just the one thing I'd kind of say is, look, it's coming, it's staying, and there's a lot of good to embrace.
Thank you very much, Ed, for your time and your energy. And we'll continue the conversation, and we look forward to the next time.
Superb. Thanks.
See you, everybody.